Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a necessary, and I have to say, a pretty difficult journey into the heart of the Sahel. We're focusing on Burkina Faso. This is a country that's just caught in a rapidly accelerating crisis. It's this terrifying mix of an escalating jihadist insurrection, a cycle of military coups, and a state response that is so violent and might actually be fueling the very conflict it's trying to stop.
Yeah, the sources we're looking at, they paint it's a catastrophic picture. It documents not just a conflict, but really a societal collapse. Burkina Faso is battling this dual crisis. You've got profound political disintegration on one hand, and then a total security collapse across huge parts of the country on the other.
And the human cost is just staggering.
It is. If you just look at the metrics, you can't deny how serious this has become. Since the insurgency really picked up steam around 2015, we're talking about at least 26,000 people killed. That's as of September 2024. And the territorial control has shifted dramatically.
Right.
The official estimates claim jihadist groups control about 30% of the country, but honestly, most independent analysts think that number is dangerously low.
And the speed of it all. I remember reading that in 2023, Burkina Faso had the single worst impact from terrorism in the entire world.
That's absolutely correct. Deaths from terrorism went up by 68% in just that 1 year. So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack this cycle of violence. We need to understand, what created that initial political vacuum, how the military strategies have backfired so badly, and how all this instability has forced a major geopolitical reshuffle.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we're trying to find the beginning of this massive security breakdown, the sources all seem to point back to one specific moment. Where does the chaos really start?
You have to start in 2014. That's the turning point. That was the year that the longtime president, Blaise Compaoré, was ousted after 27 years in power. There were these huge protests because he tried to change the constitution to stay in office. And while his removal was a big win for democracy advocates for the region's security, it was profoundly destabilizing.
So he was a dictator, but a dictator who played a very specific and I guess crucial role in regional diplomacy.
Precisely. Compaoré had expertly positioned himself as this key mediator all across West Africa. And crucially, he maintained these back-channel relationships with major jihadist groups in neighboring Mali, like Ansar al-Din. So whether you agree with his methods or not, the vacuum that his sudden removal created just instantly severed those channels. The whole national security apparatus weakened, and that created the perfect storm for Salafi ideology and violence to just pour over the border from Mali.
And that initial failure to find stability, especially on the security front, that's what then snowballs into the political chaos we've seen since.
It became a recurring theme. The civilian government's inability to stop the bloodshed led to one coup after another. We saw 2 successful military takeovers in 2022 alone. First, the January coup brought in Damiba, and then Captain Ibrahim Traoré replaced him that September. Both juntas seized power, claiming they could do a better job.
And Traoré has really tightened his grip since then.
Oh, absolutely. The sources consistently describe his rule as, governing with an iron fist. He's dramatically restricted press freedom, cracked down on unions, all of it in the name of national security and winning this war.
And here is where it gets so incredibly complex, because that security vacuum, it isn't just an absence of the state, right? It's a space that these jihadist groups are actively filling. They're basically challenging the state with a kind of parallel government.
That's the core of their strategy. The main groups, JNIM, the Islamic State of the Greater Sahara, or ISGS, they position themselves as providers. They step in with services and stability exactly where the government has failed.
But the incentives they offer, that's what really jumps out in the source material. This isn't just about ideology, it's intensely economic.
The shock factor of their recruitment pitch is huge. They're offering a monthly salary of $600 to new recruits.
$600.
$600. And for context, that is about 3 times what a teacher earns in Burkina Faso. And on top of that, they offer bonuses, $600 to $800 for participating in successful attacks. For many, this is a massive, immediate pathway out of poverty.
That kind of financial commitment, it suggests this is not just some ragtag group of extremists. They must have deep funding sources.
They do, and they're very clever about leveraging local resentment. A key part of it is gold. They target local gold and energy mines. They expropriate them from foreign companies, who locals often see as exploiters anyway, and then they hand the rights back to the residents. This generates instant local support and really solidifies their claim that they can govern better than the state.
Okay, wait, so if they're successfully setting up this parallel system, what's the cost? What's the catch for the people who accept this?
The catch is steep, and it's absolute. In return for economic stability, they impose strict Sharia law, they enforce taxes, and they inflict incredibly harsh penalties for any disobedience. We're talking public humiliation, amputation, and sometimes just immediate execution. The sources make it clear that the local population is caught in this horrific trap between the militarized state on one side and these powerful, terrifying jihadist groups on the other.
That sense of being trapped, it brings us right to Captain Traoré's aggressive counter-response. His government launched this big operation, but to fight the war, they had to create these new military units. The units became controversial almost immediately.
Right, so the official armed forces, the FDS, were expanded really quickly, mainly through two new groups. First, you have the Bataillon d'Intervention Rapide, or BIRs, the Rapid Intervention Battalions. Traoré created the first 6 of these right after his coup in late 2022. The idea was tactical, create these highly mobile offensive forces that could hunt the jihadists instead of just defending bases.
So they're essentially shock troops.
Exactly. And the speed of their creation is key. Between late 2022 and early 2025, they planned or established up to 28 BIRs. Now, the better pay attracts a lot of candidates, but the flip side is that the sources repeatedly note that there's just not enough military training before these guys are sent to the front lines, and that lack of professionalization is critical for what comes next.
And the second group was the VDPs, the civilian auxiliaries, which basically pulled the whole population into the war.
The Volontaires pour la Défense de la Patrie, pro-government paramilitary militias. By 2022, there were already about 90,000 of them. But then in April 2023, Traoré took this radical step and signed a general mobilization order. This gave the government the legal right to forcibly recruit any physically fit young man over 18 into the war effort.
Forced conscription.
Yeah.
Even into paramilitary units. That completely changes the dynamic.
It does, and it brings us to the tragic irony of the state's whole approach.
Yeah.
Because while these BIR and VDP forces are supposed to defeat the insurgency, the source material is just full of these overwhelming, consistent allegations that these very forces are committing horrific abuses against civilians.
And these abuses seem to follow a very predictable and disastrous pattern.
Yes, it's systematic targeting. The FDS, the BIRs, the VDPs, they are repeatedly accused of carrying out massacres that specifically target the Fulani ethnic group. They seem to operate under this assumption that the whole Fulani community supports the Islamist fighters, so it creates this cycle of collective punishment.
Which seems to be the critical mistake, right? Because it just creates new grievances. It's basically doing the recruitment work for the jihadists.
It's the ultimate strategic blunder, and the documentation of these events is meticulous and terrifying. If you look at the evidence, the scale of state-sponsored force used against civilians is shocking.
Let's just focus on a few of the alleged incidents that the sources highlight.
The one at Karma in April 2023 really stands out. The accusations are that military members from a BIR regiment massacred somewhere between 136 and 200 civilians in one go. Then, in early 2024, the violence just escalated. In February, in the villages of Komsilga, Nodin, and Suro, Human Rights Watch accused the army of killing 223 villagers in a single day. Just think about that. 223 people allegedly killed by the very army meant to protect them.
It's hard to even process those numbers. And especially the accusations against these brand new BIR regiments.
It is. That same month, a different BIR regiment allegedly shot 150 civilians in Bibgu and Swalamu, and it continues right up to the present. In March of 2025, pro-government militias, specifically VDP groups like the Kuka Rapid Force, were linked to another horrific massacre of dozens in Silenzo, mostly ethnic Fulani.
What are the details coming out of that one?
The sources talk about these disturbing videos that circulated online. They showed dozens of dead men, women, and children, and crucially, some of them had their hands and feet bound. The video showed armed men in what looked like VDP uniforms insulting the dead. There's a quote from one survivor that just sticks with you. He said, "Being a Fulani today is synonymous with being a terrorist."
That quote, it just perfectly captures that destructive irony you mentioned. The government calls this the reconquest of national territory, but these abuses are directly fueling ethnic violence and literally driving people into the arms of the insurgents.
It turns the mission completely on its head. And the government's response is predictable. They just reject all the criticism, call it a smear campaign. Local prosecutors have called for caution on casualty figures, but the sheer volume and consistency of the evidence just makes this pattern undeniable.
So this domestic crisis, made worse by the military's own failures, it's led to this huge geopolitical reshuffling. What does this all mean for the wider region?
Well, the biggest immediate change was the exit of the French. France had been the main security partner for nearly a decade, with operations like Barkhane and Sabre. But with all this anti-French sentiment, the junta formally requested they leave, and they were gone by February 2023.
And Russia wasted no time stepping into that void.
Not at all. Russia quickly forged new security cooperation deals using groups like the Africa Corps and Brigade Bearer paramilitaries. By mid-2024, the Russian presence was estimated at around 200 to 300 troops, mostly focused on training and protecting key government figures.
But even that new partnership has proven to be, well, volatile. It doesn't seem very stable.
Not at all. The sources noted that 100 paramilitaries from that Brigade Bear group were suddenly withdrawn in August 2024. They had only been there for 3 months before being sent back to fight in Ukraine. It just shows you the competing priorities of this new partner and leaves Burkina Faso's security planning really vulnerable.
And at the same time, the region's military juntas are trying to team up.
Right. They established the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES, in September 2023. That joins Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in a new defense pact. And crucially, this new alliance is threatening to withdraw from the main regional bloc, ECOWAS, which they see as a tool for outside interference.
And given all this violence, the biggest external risk has to be contagion. This jihadist threat clearly isn't staying inside Burkina Faso's borders.
No, the risk of spillover into West Africa's coastal states is critical. We've already seen deadly attacks in Benin, but the deepest concern is for countries like Guinea-Bissau. It's just acutely vulnerable. It has chronic political instability, weak institutions, massive poverty. Over 2/3 of the people live below the poverty line. A total collapse in Burkina Faso could be the catalyst for these groups to expand right to the Gulf of Guinea.
Before we wrap up, it's so important to look at the alternative. Other states in the region have faced this threat and actually succeeded. Let's look at Mauritania.
Mauritania is a powerful counter-narrative. They faced a serious jihadist threat starting back in 2005, but they have not had a single terrorist attack since 2011. And they did it by abandoning the failed strategies of their neighbors and really embracing comprehensive military reform.
So what did that reform actually look like? It clearly wasn't just about throwing more soldiers at the problem.
No, it was an institutional, professional approach. First, they dramatically increased soldiers' pay and equipment. They addressed the very economic grievances that fuel recruitment elsewhere. Second, they created specialized, highly trained units for desert warfare and counterterrorism. Professional units, not like the quickly assembled BIRs. And most importantly, they prioritized intelligence. That allowed them to preempt attacks instead of just reacting with this generalized abusive force. It was an approach focused on accountability, not collective punishment.
This has been a deeply challenging deep dive, tracing the collapse in Burkina Faso from a political vacuum to this systemic crisis. We followed the rise of these BIR forces and the mass mobilization of the VDPs.
And the defining feature of this whole tragedy remains the devastating human cost. It's compounded by this ethical and strategic dilemma of a state response that, through these alleged massacres, seems to be mirroring the violence of the very groups it's supposed to be fighting. The source material delivers a final, deeply uncomfortable truth.
And what's that final finding?
The analysis suggests that the widespread abuses by the security forces are actively driving people into the arms of extremist groups. The assessment is stark. It says the national armies are becoming as feared as terrorists by local populations. And that's a critical insight. It shows that stability requires something much broader than just narrow military action.
Which leaves you, the listener, with an essential question to think about. When a government tries to fight an insurgency that profits from popular grievances, what happens when the state itself is accused of becoming the primary source of new grievances? How could it possibly win? It forces you to reflect on the idea of human security and institutional accountability as maybe the most powerful counterterrorism strategy there is.